What's up guys, today we're going to be having a look at one of the latest models of a micro brand called Lilienthal Berlin. Obviously they're based in Germany. I did review one of their quartz pieces last year and it was a watch that I really liked the aesthetic of, or liked the look of it. However, the fact that it was quartz meant that I didn't end up keeping it in my collection because I just can't get over that ticking of the seconds hand. I just need a smooth sweep on that seconds hand to be able to feel connected to the watch. So that's why I am currently reviewing the Zeitgeist Automatik. This is one of their first, if I'm not mistaken, I think it actually is their first offering of an automatic watch, and they haven't just thrown any automatic movement into the watch. They haven't done what most micro brands do, which is just throw in a Seiko NH35 and call it a day. They've gone a step further, as you will see in a couple of minutes. First, let's get the packaging out of the way with these postcards. I don't really understand what the purpose of these postcards is. I'm not sure what this has to do with the watch. It's a bit strange to see this in the packaging, but at the end of the day, they've kept the packaging looking exactly the same as what it did last year when I reviewed their other piece. And the watch itself does look quite similar to the other piece, albeit with a different color dial. The other piece I reviewed had a dark dial, a black dial if I'm not mistaken. Inside here you found the pouch with the instruction manuals and a couple of stickers, and that's pretty much it for the packaging. So the packaging isn't exactly the most impressive thing that you'll ever see, but it does kind of fall in line with the design of the watch. It's not overly done, it's not lavish, but it is well executed. It's very, very well executed. So in terms of this watch, the first thing you notice by looking at the dial is that this just screams Bauhaus all over the place. I mean, this just is coming from an iconic line of watch designs that has been obviously used by higher end watches such as Nomos, but it's also been used by watches that I think are within the same kind of market that this one is, such as Junkers. However, I think that they've brought a bit of the modern era into this design, because a few of those designs by other companies can look a bit dated, a bit antiquated. However, I think that they've managed to bring that style of design, that aesthetic, into the current year, and I think they've done it quite well. Now, if you're expecting to see things like applied numerals, like any kind of flashy features to the dial, well, obviously you're not going to find it here, but what you will find is the first thing that struck me: how balanced and how well proportioned this watch is. Everything from the lug width and how they curve in at the tips, to just the way that they've structured this dial to have it perfectly balanced with the Zeitgeist on one corner, Automatik on the other, the date calendar right on top of the 6, which I think is a perfect place for them to put it on this watch, and then the Lilienthal Berlin logo underneath the 12. I think it's just perfectly balanced. One of my complaints would be the fact that it's a bit too thick. I think they could have maybe brought that outer bezel down a bit and shaved off maybe a millimeter or two of those 10 millimeters in case thickness that it has currently. I think it just sits a bit too high for my liking. However, that also plays into the fact that this isn't a small watch. Typically you'd expect a watch with this kind of aesthetic to be in a much smaller case size than this one. This does have a 42.5 millimeter diameter. Here you can see it compared to the Junkers model, which I think it most resembles. However, once again, had to pick between the two, I would definitely go for the Zeitgeist, because as I said, it just looks much more modern, much more refined. Now, as I said, this watch isn't a big watch. However, I mean, it isn't a small watch, it's quite a large watch. However, they do have a really small seconds hand, very, very thin seconds hand. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm coming from being a collector mainly of diver watches, so most of my collection at the moment is consists of divers. So obviously when you're passing from a dive watch to a watch like this, you have to kind of adjust your expectations in regards to things like legibility. I think that one of my main issues with this watch is that the seconds hand, not only is it extremely thin, but it's also a color that doesn't really stand out. I mean, I know on this shot it looks like it does, but that's because you're in the perfect lighting scenario for this watch. However, as soon as this watch gets put under the sunlight, for example, and as soon as you're looking at it from a bit more distance than you currently are, which this would be pretty much the equivalent of having your wrist right in front of your face. Once you're in the normal condition in which you'd be looking at your watch, it becomes quite hard to see the time, and it becomes quite hard to find the seconds hand on this watch. The thing that does aid this watch along with the legibility is the fact that the sapphire crystal with the anti-reflective coating is very, very effective. As you can see the difference here between the how shiny the crystals are in this Richard Legrand watch and this Lilienthal Berlin watch. You can tell how good the anti-reflective coating is, and that is definitely helping the legibility a lot. However, I would have maybe liked to see just a tiny bit more thickness on that seconds hand. One thing I do really like is the fact that the sapphire crystal is completely flat. Just gorgeous. It looks beautiful. It's very well fitting with the whole aesthetic of the watch, keeping it flat at the top, adding very little curves where they don't have to be. So once again, I've seen a few watches with this same kind of design that add a bit of a dome crystal at the corners. I think that would have thrown this design off completely, so I'm very happy to see them using that flat crystal, which is pretty much the same one they used in the previous model in the quartz version. Now, I gave you a bit of a sneak peek to the movement at the back, so why don't we move on to the movement itself? As I said, it is a Sellita SW200. It has a 36-hour power reserve, or 38-hour if I'm not mistaken, with a 26 joules. It's one of my favorite movements for these kind of lower end Swiss pieces. I think that personally, if I had to choose between the ETA 2824 and the Sellita SW200, albeit they are clones at the end of the day, but I think that based on reliability of my own experience with my own watches with these different kinds of movements, I think that the SW200 has been much more reliable for me personally, so I would choose the SW200. Now, one thing I don't like is this huge amount of text. I know the reviews have mentioned this too, but there's just way too much text. Everything you could possibly want to know about the watch. I mean, I don't even have to review it. Just read the case back and you have all your information there. It's way too much. Had they got rid of the second line on each one of these blotches of text, it would have looked much cleaner, much better, or maybe just kept 2 of them instead of 4. It would have looked much better. However, the case back is very well put together. I really like those screws in the corners, and I really like obviously the fact they have a display case back, because at the end of the day the SW200 is a quite handsome movement, so it's definitely worth seeing. And my favorite part of the case back by far has to be that rotor with that black finish. I mean, it's just gorgeous, and it's particularly interesting because you'd never expect to see such an aggressive rotor on the back of this watch. After looking at the front of it, after looking at the face, I mean, the face is so kind of subdued, kind of serious, some may even say somewhat boring, but then you just turn it over and it's just aggressive looking. I mean, just look at how it plays with the light, with that engraving of the logo right in the center. I mean, it's a gorgeous rotor. It's one of the nicest rotors I've seen on a watch in quite some time, and it definitely, as I said, makes a big contrast to the dial. So once again, this isn't just your standard micro brand watch. I think that they have really put some attention to detail into this piece, and that's why I think that the fact that the price is what it is, which is currently 499 euros, is indeed justified. Because even though, as I said, it's not the most flashy watch in the world, it doesn't have many different materials that maybe you would expect for this kind of a price, it is done perfectly. I mean, what they wanted to do has been done to the highest standard you could do it for this price. So I have really no complaints in terms of the fit and finish of this watch. Now, one thing that I do have to say is this crown is extremely hard to use. It's very hard to use. I mean, as you can see, the edges are practically polished. There's no grip whatsoever, and it's very hard even to just take it out to be able to actually actuate it. So one thing that you have to keep in mind is that, as other reviewers have said, if you bite your nails, this probably isn't the watch for you. But at the end of the day, the fact that the crown is the way it is ends up meaning that the aesthetic is going to be as clean and as neat and tidy as it currently is with that crown pushed in. So I think that whenever you try and think of a complaint that you'd have about this watch, you have to think about what is the purpose of the way they decided to do it. And once you think of the purpose, you realize that that complaint isn't as much a complaint as just part of the design that we're going for. I mean, nothing has been done incorrectly. Nothing has been done in a way that I'd say, okay, do it this way and it'd be better. It's just all been done to fit their aesthetic, and in so doing, they have managed to accomplish a very, very well put together watch. And I feel that, once again, for this price, yes, it does have a lot of competition, obviously, not just in this style of watch, but in many different watches that you could get for this price range. But in regards of what you're getting for this style of a watch, I think that €499 is perfectly fair, and this is definitely going to stay in my collection. This is definitely a keeper. I hope you enjoyed the review, guys. Till the next time, peace.